Hello, fellow Fenn treasure hunters. Matt Brewer here again. And you know, when I heard that the first through the ninth clues were between where warm waters halt and the blaze, based on a recent comment and interview from Forrest Fenn himself, I thought initially that this would be a fairly easy vlog in which to prepare. But as I started trying to number the clues, well, two things became readily apparent. First of all, my solution bias was overriding the logic constraints provided by Mr. Fenn. What that means in real terms is there's a very good chance that I've had probably 5 of them flat out wrong. Secondly, it is most fortunate for me, and probably others as well, that it probably doesn't matter. And I say that because the first clue is the most important. And Mr. Fenn told us what that clue was several years ago. All right, so here's the constraints that I was talking about earlier. And they're based upon these comments directly from Mr. Fenn himself, but I think that they're very important. And the first one is that they're contiguous. Did I say contiguous? Contiguous. Oh boy. I knew where I wanted to hide the treasure chest, so it was easy for me to put one foot down and then step on it to get to the next foot. So that's what I did. What that means in real terms is what he's been telling us is one step goes to the next. Think about it as putting an X on the map. Each clue equals an X on the map, and we go from X to X to X to X, right? Seems simple enough. Second thing is, he said, the clues did not exist when I was a kid, because he just wrote the poem, but most of the places the clues refer to did. So they were around, almost all of them have been around for a long time, and I think that they may exist in 100 years, but the geography probably will change before we reach the next millennia. So in 1,000 years, the geography will probably change. Geography is an important part here. He said several times, geography is important. That'll help you find the treasure, along with a good map in my poem. A good understanding of geography will probably help as well. Third comment, all you have to do is think about the 9 clues and follow them in order. And finally, I would advise new searchers to look for the clues in my poem and try to marry them to a place on the map. Again, this speaks to the clues being an X that you could put on a map. So I started trying to do this, and I figured out pretty quick that it's very hard to put an X on the map for every supposed clue. And so I conducted a little experiment, and I would encourage you, if I think you'll get a lot out of it, I know I did, to write your own starting stanza. Meaning, try just writing the first 2 or 3 clues as waypoints in the poem stanza with the constraints that Forrest laid out for us earlier. Meaning, pick your special spot, and then try to write in the poem stanza form that Forrest has the first 2 or 3 lines such that it's difficult but not impossible to find those first 2 or 3 clues. Make it step-by-step waypoints, with each clue being an X on the map. And make sure that you have a very high probability that your waypoints will be around in 100 years. Not one of your waypoints, not 2 of your waypoints, but all of your waypoints. And then the first 2 clues need to be found on a map or on Google Earth. Okay? So I tried this. And here's let me show you real quick. This is my special spot right here. Why it's my special spot? It was special for me because it set into motion a lifelong, just a real passion for fishing. My dad took me fishing here when I was 5 years old, and it was the first time experience fishing, and we had a blast. I had a blast. We caught more bluegill than you can even imagine, and I've gone so far as to fish professionally in bass tournaments and so forth, and I've done fairly well doing that. Okay, so I have to figure out how to make this poem work with my special spot, because I know I want to make it work. All right, so we'll start there. It's right here outside of Muncie. I don't know why it's not showing up anymore, but anyway. All right, so there's my little special spot, and this is where I knew up to 69 here that I wanted to start the poem. All right? And here's what I came up with. Begin it where 3 waters part and take it in the canyon down. Not far, but too far by cart. Now, I chose cart because there's actually a reference to a wagon wheel or a cart at an intersection in the canyon down. But what this did was in these short 3 lines, what it did for me was really open up my mind to think about how difficult it really is to write in this form and not make it so darn easy that it would be solved, within days. Then what I determined was that natural geographic waypoints have the best chance of being around in 100 years. But what's important here is to think about the clues. The fact that they're contiguous means that they're effectively a chain. And then all 9 clues are probably geographic, because that's about the only way. Even if I talk about buildings, for example, do I know that they're going to be around in 100 years? Maybe not. So it's very likely, in my opinion, from doing this exercise, that all 9 clues are probably geographic. Because if one of those clues gets destroyed, knocked down, changes in the next 100 years, you've broken the chain and it gets exponentially harder to solve. Finally, it's particularly difficult to make the clues contiguous. To put an X on the map for each clue without being completely obvious. Now, all right? So, here's what I determined, and this is particularly interesting to me because a lot has changed by applying those basic rules. So first, we've always known, well, pretty close to always, from pretty close to the beginning, we knew that the first clue was where warm waters halt. So you can put an X on the map where warm waters halt. Okay, clue number 1. Clue number 2, the canyon down. Now, I'm thinking this means the head of the canyon down, but this might not even be correct. It may not be that clue number 2 is the head of the canyon. It may be that clue number 2 is actually in the canyon down at a place that's too far to walk. But for this exercise, I'm going to say that I think it's more likely that clue number 2 is at the head of the canyon down, and then too far to walk in the canyon down is clue number 3. Now, from the preface or introduction of his book, Too Far to Walk, he tells us that Too Far to Walk is about 10 river miles in the book, his second memoir. If you look at it from the perspective of all I need is the poem and a map and a decent bit of geography to solve this, well, then there's got to be a clue in Too Far to Walk. Or else, without that second memoir, we'd have no idea how far Too Far to Walk is. It's so subjective. So I would say that there's probably some intersection, a long-running, a historical intersection. Maybe it's something like, I don't know, train tracks go across this river in the canyon, and that's where the spot is that's too far to walk. Or maybe it's the long walk of the Navajo, for example, where it was kind of like the, the Trail of Tears for the Cherokee on the east, towards the east in the Midwest. The long walk of the Navajo, several of them died, the same type of thing. Maybe Too Far to Walk is where they crossed. There's a river crossing or a bridge or something of that nature. Maybe that's where they cross. So that's the spot where it's too far to walk. Okay? So I think that there has to be a clue in there, because if we didn't have the second memoir, we'd have no clue. We would have literally no clue. We'd have no way of determining or of getting a understanding of how far that is. So there's got to be something in there, I think. Clue number 4, Homer Brown. Clue number 5, No Place for the Meek. I can put an X on a place that is no place for the meek. All right. Now here's where I came to some interesting dilemmas, so to speak. When I got to clue number 6, the No Paddle Creek, I started thinking about the way that is phrased. And it's phrased in a way that paddle is a noun. It's not a verb. And we know that Forrest has said, hey, you can't ignore any of the nouns. So if I said there'll be no paddling up your creek, that would be a verb. But no paddle up your creek, the paddle is a noun. So maybe what we should be thinking about is some sort of a paddle that's marking this creek that I could put an X on the map. The No Paddle Creek. There's no paddle up your creek because the paddle's down the creek. It's at the bottom. So from the No Paddle Creek, there may be a hint, or not a hint, a clue in between 6 and 7 here. And that is the end is ever drawing nigh. Now, I've always taken the end ever drawing nigh as a direction to go from one clue to the next. So I've kind of subscribed to the same idea that many have, that nigh means left, and I should be looking for something on my left. Right? But what if a drawing nigh, maybe there's a clue in drawing. Like, for example, if this is literally ever drawing nigh. I'm making left-hand turns over and over, and so I'm always drawing nigh a left hand, which actually makes a box. Get back in the box. Something to think about there. Now, here's where things got really different for me when I really thought about putting X's on the map for each clue. So if I'm following them in order and they're contiguous, then I go from my no paddle creek, marked with the paddle here, and then the next thing he says, there'll be no paddle up your creek, just heavy loads, water high, in order. So 7 now has changed for me. I'm saying clue number 7 is heavy loads. It's something I can mark on the map. And clue number 8 is water high. All right? And then finally, the last clue, he tells us, is the blaze. Maybe it's a wise blaze. If you've been wise and found the blaze, look quickly down, your quest cease. So I see that as the 9th clue, and he's all but confirmed that. These changed for me. I thought previous to this that heavy loads and water high were effectively hints or confirmers that I had the right creek. What I think is most important in that exercise is leaving behind your preconceived notions based upon your solution bias. Don't do what I did. I let that override my logic. Next up, too far to walk. Why it's important, and I think it's very important. Thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and always, thanks for watching. Matt Brewer.